and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. You know, to be a musician, you have to know a lot. But that fortunately, as you're learning a few things at a time, and one thing accumulates on another, and you get to learn it, and it doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, I sit down to play, I pick up my instrument, I know how to pick it up, I know how to hold it, I know how to blow into it, I know how to play the notes, I know how to tongue the notes, I know how to phrase the music, I know how to write the music out if I have to write it, I can count the time. But you take a look at all of those functions. That's a lot of functions. There are people, when they first get an instrument, they don't even know how to pick it up. So you teach them how. Why is that important? You can drop and break and seriously damage an instrument if you don't know how to put it together, which is why a while back I did a segment on how do you put your instruments together. If you don't know how to place your hands, how are you going to know how to play a D as opposed to a B? They're two different notes. How do you know how to tongue? Someone has to teach you, and you can't play without tonguing. Tonguing is one of the most important things. But in addition to that, reading notes, knowing when you see an A on some kind of a staff, you know it's an A, and knowing then this is the way that you play that A. Or if you see an E, this is the way that you play the E. And is it a high E or is it a low E? What do you do with your thumb? It makes a difference in order to be able to get an octave, whether it's a high octave or whether it's a low octave. And then how do you take care of the instrument? How do you put it away? How do you clean it out? There's just more and more and more things you need to know. I saw a young lady, she was probably a teenager, late teenager, and she was going to be playing a saxophone solo. Well, my main instrument is saxophone. I've played saxophone for years. She wanted to warm it up. And she knew enough to know that the reed would have to be wet and damp in order to play the reed. Otherwise, all it'll do is squeak and squawk, because it's a cane reed and it vibrates on a plastic mouthpiece, and it has to be damp to be able to do that. Well, she picked up her saxophone and she took off the mouthpiece, and then she blew into the mouthpiece in order to keep it warm. Well, that would be good for the mouthpiece and the neck piece if it was attached to the neck piece, and I believe it was. But what about the rest of the instruments? That's still sitting cold on a chair someplace, and so therefore getting notes out of it would be difficult. So you have to know all kinds of things. You have to be able to read music, tongue music, and know what the music is, and it is a language. All of the signs and the symbols mean something. So what I decided to do today, just to start off, is to kind of etch out some things. I have some charts here. This I just kind of drew by hand. I mean, it's nothing that's really, really exceptional, but I want to point out some things to you in terms of timing so you'll have a better understanding of it. And it's important. I met a man, I met him, he was watching my shows, and he happened to recognize me, and we were in a social setting, and he came over to talk to me, and he says, I watch your shows. And for me, the thing that's the most important is the timing. How do you count the beats when you play the notes? I don't have any trouble playing the notes, but how do I count the beats so they're long enough? And so I decided that this morning I'll start off, and I'll probably be doing a little at a time. But at any rate, this is just my kind of hand drawings, because I didn't use a stencil or anything. This is a circle. It's a circle that's a hole. And a lot of times when I'm teaching kids, I'll have a picture of a whole pizza, which is a circle, or a whole donut, which can be a circle. Anything that shows a circle, a cracker, it'll show a circle. This is a hole. There's nothing colored in. And usually, this is going to be 4 beats, but it can be more than that. It can be whatever the time signature says it's going to be. So, here you have a time signature. I've got several of them listed out here. 4-4, 3-4, 6-8, And I've got another 6/8 here. I've got another 3/4 here. What does that mean anyway? You see it at the beginning of music. 4, or the top part of this time signature, tells you how many beats there are in a measure. And for the most part, it's going to be, for the kind of playing that most people do, it's going to be 4 beats or 3 beats or 6 beats, but you could have 2/4 and have it 2 beats a measure. You could have it 2/2 and still have it 2 beats a measure with a half note getting 1 beat. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can write this out. So let's say this is 4/4, this is 3/4, this is 6/8 time. Now, this whole is an entire measure. The number of beats it gets is the number that the time signature says it has. It can be a whole measure. Usually when you have a circle like that as a whole note, that's the only note in the measure. And it has all the beats of that measure. So if it's the only one in the measure, then this would be 4. 4/4 time means that this whole note gets 4 beats, and the quarter note is the one that gets 1 beat. If you take that circle and you cut it in half, then you have half and half. And if you cut it again, then you have fourths. If you have 4, then the quarter note is 1 beat. I want to check something out here because I want to show you something else. I'll start off with this. This might make this a little bit clearer. Then I'm going to flip the page again. This is the whole. If you cut it in half, then you have 2 halves. You could cut it either way and get 2 halves. 2 halves mean a whole. What if you wanted 3? Well, then you could draw something like this. I don't have it drawn evenly, but this is all 1/3. 3/3 make a whole. 2 halves make a whole. And what if you cut it this way? Then you've got 4. This is 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. So this is a 4th. That is usually 3/4 time, 4/4 time equals a quarter note, because here's a quarter of it, here's a quarter of it, here's a quarter of it, and here's a quarter of it. 4 quarters equals a whole. So I'm basing this all basically on the whole note. Now let me skip this again and flip it over again so I can show you some other things. Whoops. Okay. So this is a chart we had before. This would be 3 beats to a measure. Notice this measure still has just 1 whole. The whole is whatever the time signature says it is. So this whole is worth 3 beats. And here again, the quarter note gets 1 beat. This one is 6 beats. Why? The time signature says 6, and there is an 8 down here. So there are 6 beats to the measure. That whole is worth 6 beats, and it's the 8th note that gets 1 beat. 6/8 time is a common time signature. 6/8 time is a lot like waltz tempo. It's like 3/4. You know, you can play it and it sounds the same as 3/4. So 4 beats per measure. A quarter note gets 1 beat. 3 beats a measure. A quarter note still gets 1 beat, but there's only 3 beats to the measure. 6 beats to the measure, and the 8th note gets 1 beat, because I can take this and I can recut it into various lengths. I mean, I can do the quarter, I can do the half, I can also cut it so it's in 8ths, or I can cut it so it's in 16ths. If I cut it and split it more, I could get 30 seconds out of it. So at any rate, a dot, I want to tell you a little story about this. A dot adds half as much as what the note is actually worth. Now this is just a story I came across. It's there was everything that you buy, you know, like watches or whatever, they have a logo. They have a little sign that's theirs. If you buy an instrument, like say you get a Kahn, there'll be a little logo, and you know when you look at it that was built by Kahn. Well, there was a watch company, and they wanted a logo. Now, I can say that they probably spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for the logos. Some of them are very, very elaborate, they're very hard to do, and it must cost the company that's making something a lot of money for a logo. Well, this watch company wanted a logo for their new watch series, and they went to a company that does this kind of thing, that does artwork and so forth, and consultants looked at the watches, and they came up with all kinds of designs. In the end, I just don't understand why they would accept, the watch company would accept it. But they said after much consultation, much study, working very hard, they came up with a logo for that watch. What was it? It was a dot. I mean, a fifth grader could have done as well, a dot. That whole logo for the watch company was a dot. Now, I don't know what that dot represented, but they did put a circle around it. So that company paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a dot with a circle around it, for the logo for their new watch company. I would have been kind of disgusted, but dots are important in music. If you have a dot beside a note, it equals half of what the note is worth. So say this is a quarter, this is a whole note, and it's worth 4 beats because it's in four time, and it's the only note in the measure. It's got a dot beside it right here. All right, that makes it 6 beats because the dot gives you half again what the note is worth. If it's a half note and it has a dot, then you add 1 beat, because a half note is 2 beats, and half of that is 1 beat, so you add the dotted half and you get 3 beats. In this situation, you get 6 beats. Now, to my way of thinking, if a measure is 6 beats long, because you have 6/8 notes or something like that, that whole note would be equal that 6 beats. You wouldn't have to put a dot beside it, but some people would put a dot beside it because since a whole note is actually worth, in many kinds of music, 4 beats, that dot would make it 6 beats. For this is a half note. This is a half note. It's a clear note with a stem. There are no flags on it, but this is the stem, and it's clear. That's usually going to be 2 beats. If I want 3 beats, I can put a dot beside it, and that 2 beats becomes 3 beats because it's worth, the dot makes it worth 1/2 more than what it is originally, so half of 2 is 1. You get 3 beats. But you would also get 3 beats if you just use the whole note. Because if the measure is 3 beats, 3/4, 3/8, whatever it is, it's going to be worth 3 beats anyway, because this is worth whatever the measure is worth. So there's no need to put a dot beside it to get 6 beats. There's no need to put a dot beside it to get 3 beats. You could use the whole note, and it would be the same thing. And that's the way I usually write it, the easiest as possible. Or you can get the 3 beats just by taking 3 quarter notes. This is a quarter note, the body of the note, and then you have the stem. And you can put the stem in different directions, it doesn't matter, but that stem makes it a quarter note. And if you put a hold on it and put them all together, you get 3 beats that way too. So there are various ways of writing various things. Okay, 3/2 time signature would say there's 3 beats to the measure, and a half note gets 1 beat. So therefore, this half note is 1 beat, this half note is the second beat, and 2 quarters equals a half, and so therefore, tie them together, there's your 3rd beat. So there's all kinds of fancy things you can do. And if you stop to think of it, a lot of it is just plain logic. A whole note is going to be whatever the measure says. If it's 4/8 or something, then it's going to be 4 beats. And the number underneath tells you what kind of a note gets 1 beat. And that's how you read the music. So let me flip this. I just want to kind of review this because sometimes it can look more complicated than what it actually is. Now, supposing you have 12/8 time. Well, you wouldn't usually get it, but you could. You can write it the way that you want to. 12 beats to a measure, and the eighth note gets one beat. The eighth note is a note like this. It has the body, it has the stem, and it has one flag on it. You can write it in any direction you want to, but that one flag on the stem makes it an eighth note. So for this time signature, you would have 12 beats to a measure, and you would have the eighth note getting one beat. If I wanted to write it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You can do it that way. Now, they might be different notes, but you could write it that way, different with a flag and the stems. A flag with a stem makes it an eighth note. The eighth note in this time signature would equal one beat, and you would have the equivalent of 12 of them every measure. Now, I could write music for this if I wanted to, and maybe I will, just to show it to you, in order to demonstrate it. I don't have any music written that way. It's not usual to have music written that way, but you can get different note combinations. For example, here's a quarter note, and the quarter note equals 2 eighth notes. Now, what I really wanted to show you today is a dotted quarter and an eighth, written like this. Now the stem might go up instead of down, but a dotted quarter and an eighth, how do you count it? Well, a dotted quarter is equal to 3 eighth notes, because a quarter note has 2 eighths. So if you were to divide this in half, if you were to divide a quarter in half, you would get 2 eighths. Now, with a dot beside it, you get an extra eighth, so it's actually 3 eighths notes. And this would be like 2 eighths, and this would be the 3rd eighth. So when you count it, it's 1, 2, and, 1, 2, and, or 3, 4, and. You talk about the next beat and then put an and to it. That's how you count it. So quarter, split it in half, you get 2 eighths. If you were to join them together and hold them together, then they would be equivalent to this quarter. A dotted quarter gives you 1 extra half of what the note is worth. So if a quarter is equal to 2 eighths and you put a dot beside it, it actually is equal to 3 eighths. Now what I did here is I put another quarter and I put an eighth. So actually that dotted quarter is the equivalent of 3 eighth notes. This quarter would be 2 eighths, because the quarter is split apart is 2 eighths, and then you add 1 more eighth. So you're actually putting these two together, and then that means you have 1 eighth left over. So what do you do with that? You usually play it right after you play the dotted quarter, and that's how you get the 1, 2, and 1, 2, and. Now I think I may review this again next time, because I want you to catch it. It's not that hard when you get used to it. It really isn't that hard when you get used to it. But if you're not used to it, it can be confusing. So I'm going to put this down for now and put some music up. We don't have a whole lot of time, but I would like to do this. I want to show you something, and then I want to play it. I always have to make 2 copies of everything. Let's see. All right, I'll do it this way. I think you'll be able to see it better if I put this copy up. Now you'll notice I have that dotted quarter and an eighth. So this is 1, 2, 3, and. Okay? 1, 2, 3, and. And then this is going to be 3 beats because it's a whole note. And the whole note is equivalent to what the time measure says it is, and so therefore it's worth 3 beats. And these are all worth 3 beats because they're 3/4 notes. 3/4 notes, and you have the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, and. And now I wrote the 3 beats. This is a 3-beat measure, and I did it as a half note with a dot. And I just did it both ways so you can see it, because a half is worth 2 beats, and then you have a dot which gives it another beat, so therefore you still have the 3 beats for your measure, and then 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The reason I think you might have some trouble in understanding this is that I'm not a mathematician. I'm not good at math. And so I have to have things explained to me, and when I catch it, I understand it, but I'm not good at math at all. I'm good at other things instead. And I imagine a lot of people who are taking music lessons would look at that and say, 1, 2, 3, and it's not 1, 2, 3, it's 1, 2, 3, and. So what I'm going to do is play this, and we don't have a whole lot of time with it, so I may have to do actually include it next session. But let me play this. I'm not going to play it fast. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's the speed I'm going to take it. You notice that this is the time signature we're talking about right here. This, with the F sharp, is the key signature. What does the key signature show us? Well, F is sharp. That means it goes up 1/2 step. A sharp goes up 1/2 step. A flat goes down 1/2 step. So let me play this, and I won't play it fast. It's not meant to be played fast anyway. Now I want to go over the first 3 measures, and you see how I played it. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And let me just play those measures and see if you can count it out like I am playing it. Well, I went beyond the 3, but you can see what I was trying to get you to do. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. 1 beat, 2 beats, but it also, you add an 1/8 to it because it's dotted. That means you hold it a little bit longer. Not much, but a little bit. You hold it an 1/8 note longer, as if it's a part of the note. You don't tongue a second note. You tongue that note, but you hold it like it's a note and a half. And then that 1/8 note is left. That 1/8 note is left over, and you just play it as an 1/8 note. So when you get this kind of timing, which is real common in music, it's a real common type of timing, you know how to do it. Count it like 1, 2, 3, and, you know, and that's the way the whole song is written. I did it purposely. I wrote it purposely so I could show you what the dotted quarter and the 1/8 looks like. So we don't have much time left. I'm going to close it here, but I think I'm going to review part of this next time, and then I'm going to go into different kinds of timing so you can understand it, write music for it, and so this will be a good educational tool for you. So we'll close it here. Please join me next time.